everyone, welcome to the Canada News with your host Divya. Now let's take a look on the headlines. Ontario man dies of blood clots after receiving AstraZeneca vaccine. Health officials in Canada said efforts are being made to vaccinate all Canadians as soon as possible. Mayor John Tory arrives at Toronto City Council where he provided information on the vaccination rollout. Now news in detail. An Ontario man in his 40s has died after receiving a first dose of the AstraZeneca vaccine, public health officials confirmed. Dr. Barbara Yaffe, Ontario Associate Minister, Chief Medical Officer of the Health, said that while the death is still being investigated, the man did have the blood clotting disorder known as vaccine-induced immune thrombocytopenia. Dr. Yaffe said the man was given an AstraZeneca vaccine shot towards the end of April and died few weeks later. Yaffe said while the investigation is ongoing and a final cause of death has yet to be officially determined, it has been confirmed that the individuals did have VITT at the time of his death. Yaffe also said the risk associated with this vaccine rare, but they are real. Chief Medical Officer Dr. David Williams halted the use of AstraZeneca as a first dose of May 11, noting a higher rate of blood clots than expected. In Ontario, roughly 1 in 6 lakh first doses led to blood clots, and the risk is considered much lower for a second dose. Health officials in Canada said efforts are being made to vaccinate all Canadians as soon as possible. But the decision as to reopening will be based on the local conditions, with the goal being is to fully vaccinate all Canadians by September. But some provisions have already moved in that direction, and hopefully this goal will be achieved in this summer.
Well, first of all, I would say that we all recognize that Canada is a big country, and so it's difficult to put out guidance at the federal level that really applies to the whole of the country, because one region can certainly vary compared to another region. Having said that, in terms of the I would say aspirational goals that we put forward in terms of vaccination coverage, certainly we relied on our modeling experts. Lots of assumptions in there. If you saw our presentation a few weeks ago in terms of looking at different metrics, but at the end of the day, I think we're good. At least it's something that Canadians, I think, can relate to in terms of a target to shoot for the 1 dose and then 2 doses. And as we've always said, and I think that's what's playing out with the provinces and territories as well, is the fact that it's not just about the vaccine coverage alone. We want to vaccinate as many Canadians as soon as possible, with 1 dose and then 2 doses. But in terms of opening up and, loosening of restrictions, public health measures, that also depends on the local situation, the epidemiology, what's happening with community transmission, what's happening with the healthcare system, is it being overloaded or not? So, those are all the factors in play that well, I would say yes, we don't really know a precise number in terms of herd immunity, but certainly based on the evidence that we have to date, the experience from other countries, including ourselves with our vaccine rollout, we're anticipating that the herd immunity as far as vaccination and vaccination coverage, that would be good to shoot for. We recognize in Canada that overall, compared to other countries, we actually have quite a large percentage of the population that is still susceptible. If you look at other countries that unfortunately had a tougher time earlier, they may actually have a greater percentage of the population that has, quote, natural immunity based on having actually had COVID-19. So in Canada, I think it's much more important to actually improve or increase our vaccination coverage so that we do get that herd immunity.
Mayor John Tory arrives at Toronto City Council where he provided information on the vaccination rollout. The mayor also asked Canadians over the age of 12 to book and get vaccinated so that the city could be reopened as soon as possible. He repeatedly appealed to the people to book and get all vaccines. The mayor also thanked all city residents and community organizations.
And I'm joined by Dr. Kevin Smith, the CEO of the UHN, which is one of our most distinguished among many healthcare organizations that has hospital brand names well known to you, Toronto General, Toronto Western, Mount Sinai, and with Councillor Joe Cressy, the chair of the Board of Health. And Dr. Smith represents a team of people who are here in the City Hall today that are drawn from the community and drawn from all parts of the healthcare system to operate a vaccine clinic. I think it probably would be the first of its kind here in the rotunda of City Hall. And it was his idea. I'll give him credit for that. And I immediately embraced it because I think there is nothing more symbolic and substantive than to have in the place that people are so familiar with in our city, the place where they can come, and they do come for celebrations and for vigils and for protests, that they can come here and get vaccinated. And we are, of course, urging people over the course of the day, starting about now, to come here. The province, Premier Ford and others have lowered the age of eligibility to 12 plus for those who wish to get vaccinated, so that we're encouraging families to come here as part of the cause that we're all engaged in, which is to get people to get vaccinated so that we can keep people healthy, most of all, but also so that we can reach those threshold levels put in place by the province to allow the city to open again. As of this morning, there are already thousands of people who have taken advantage of the change in the eligibility rules. And also, over the course of the weekend, I'm very heartened to say, because I started on Friday saying that we had 14,000 unbooked appointments in our city clinics, and that number has dropped down to now less than 5,000 to book an appointment by going online at toronto.ca or using the phone number that I can't remember in my head, so I don't want to recite it. But it's important. It's important to the well-being of yourself and your coworkers and your family and your neighbors that you should get vaccinated. We're making such incredible progress as a city, and now we just have to keep the momentum going, even on a holiday weekend. And frankly, all these rules that are in place have limited the number of things that you can do, although there was some good news with outdoor activities this weekend. But if you need something to do, this is a really great thing to do for yourself, or take someone else.
Nova Scotia has received the first batch of the COVID-19 vaccine, after which Premier Aaron Rankin did a press conference and expressed happiness after receiving the first dose in the province. He also said that the dose of the Pfizer vaccine has been provided in the Nova Scotia.
Yeah, it's outstanding. They're doing over 1,000 shots today. The whole process from beginning to the end is really seamless. I was here before to check in on them and just thank all the volunteers and all the people working here. There's a lot of retired nurses. Today, Sharon did my shot. She's a retired nurse, and she was just fabulous. She made it all very enjoyable, actually. She was really patient, and she went through everything. It was awesome. So your latter point, the age-based approach will continue, but based on our volumes and how well we're doing, we'll actually be able to do it in advance of when normally is scheduled. Tomorrow we'll have more to say on that. There'll be an actual more technical briefing, and then Dr. Strang and I will do our briefing following that. But it looks like we'll be well ahead of schedule for second doses for everyone. So because the age is by far the biggest risk of death and severe disease, so that's why we've been able to limit what's been happening to our older demographics in this third wave. Because we've stayed on track, we're weeks ahead of schedule. So everyone will have their shot by mid-June. So we'll actually be delivering second shots out late in June to the older age demographics, to healthcare workers, and we'll continue down that path, and we'll be well ahead of schedule that way.
An investigation has been started into the allegations of sexual harassment against Major General Denny Fortin, head of the Canada's corona vaccine distribution. The Canadian Department of the Defense has acknowledged sexual exploitation activities within the armed force. Former Supreme Court Justice issues recommendations to prevent sexual exploitation in the Army.
It was done as was possible to make it look like the report had been responded to without any real change. And I think it's time that we were just honest about that. No structural change, no legislative change, no outside the department, outside the Canadian Armed Forces reporting, those kinds of things that Madame Deschamps emphasized.
From our perspective, we believe that we have achieved all those 10 recommendations. However, that is our opinion.
We absolutely have to embrace external recommendations and not be defensive about this. We need to own this. I don't know. Is it a question of power dynamics that we need a much better understanding of the use and the abuse of power? Is it the exclusionary aspects of parts of our culture that I've talked about before? I don't know.
It's about power. I think it's about the abuse of authority And I think that there are many officers, male officers and male leaders of all ranks in the Canadian Armed Forces who don't abuse their power.
US Vice President Kamala Harris hosted a listening program on digital devices. Under this special session, investment and job growth in the United States were discussed. In addition to this, high-speed and cheap internet data delivery was also ensured.
I will share these stories as examples of the point. Can you explain a bit about the use of telemedicine as it relates to mental health treatment compared to the use of telemedicine for physical health treatment? Or, yeah.
Absolutely. You should know that mental health care and telebehavioral telepsychiatry, it was one of the first applications of telemedicine because it's so successful. Mm-hmm. As long as you have a good connection, that's all you need, you know. So it's really, really important that mental health and behavioral health patients have access to telemedicine.
School teachers in Alberta will have to go to school this week. Teachers are expressing concern over the corona pandemic situation as they return back to schools, where they say they are doubly concerned about an pandemic and their relationship with the province.
Any one local or any one area of the province. The original motion was sponsored by 29 different locals from across Alberta. The takeover of our pension with AIMCO, without any consultation whatsoever. We've seen funding cut to public schools, whereas some of those funds were not cut to private schools.
One of the first moves that this ministry made was to roll back protections for LGBTQ students. And then, they celebrated that with that infamous fountain picture. And from there, it's been decreasing PUF funding, which supports students that have special needs and need some additional supports in the classroom. Continuing decreasing funding and then, twisting themselves into all sorts of positions to deny that they have decreased funding. Saw this weekend when folks from across the province were speaking to this motion in support of it.
Canada is the only country in the G7 to receive doses of the COVID-19 vaccine from COVAX. This is the Global Vaccine Distribution Initiative. WHO Immunization Director gave suggestions on Canada vaccine.
The second thing is about whether they are also going to retain their effectiveness against these variants of concern that are circulating around the world. And those are really the two biggest things that we're still waiting to understand the full data on. So certainly from a WHO perspective, this is too soon to make those kinds of definitive statements. But what is really important is that the world is ready for that, and particularly that the manufacturers are doing whatever they need to do to be sure that if it's needed, we're not in a position as a world to be unable to deliver those doses. That's exactly the reason, is that as everybody knows, that these are vaccines that have been around for a little less than a year, and certainly only in routine use for the past 5 months. And so really it's about the time that we need to look at what's happening with people's immune system after having been vaccinated and how responsive they are to these new variants, as well as the usual strains that are circulating. Billion doses of vaccine that have been administered around the world.
Canada is unlikely to receive the COVID-19 vaccine in the coming days, but Pfizer-BioNTech will deliver 6 lakh doses this week. 2 pharmaceutical firms were to deliver 2 million shots in the next 7 days, but last week they delivered only 1.4 million doses. Pfizer and BioNTech continue to deliver doses, although other vaccine manufacturers are late in sending their shipments. According to information received, they will start giving 2.4 million doses weekly in June. The federal government is expected to receive more doses of the Moderna vaccine by the end of May, but officials say it is not yet clear when the doses will be available. In addition, another 1 million doses of Oxford AstraZeneca are expected to be delivered by the end of June. Health Canada, meanwhile, is still evaluating Johnson & Johnson 3 lakh vaccines. The vaccines were delivered last month but are yet to be distributed. That's all we have in this bulletin. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more updated news.